Today at 6, the Archbishop of Canterbury comes under increasing pressure to quit. Justin Welby is accused of being part of a cover-up of a prolific child sex abuser. Allegations against John Smythe were reported to Welby, among others, but he was allowed to escape justice. A senior bishop says Welby must go.
I think, sadly, his position's untenable, so I think he should resign.
Strengthening alliances. Sir Keir Starmer is the first British leader invited to France for Armistice Day since Sir Winston Churchill. A referee is suspended after apparently making derogatory comments about the Liverpool team and its former manager. And oceans apart, how a discovery about the moons of Uranus means they could possibly support life.
On BBC London, twice as likely to reoffend, how an increasing number of ex-prisoners are homeless and living on the capital streets. We have a special report.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC 6 o'clock news. Pressure is growing on the Archbishop of Canterbury to resign over an alleged cover-up of a sadistic child sex abuser. The Bishop of Newcastle has now added her voice to a petition by the General Synod calling on Justin Welby to quit. It centres on a man called John Smythe, who ran Christian children's camps for many years. A report last week concluded that Smythe had committed prolific, brutal and horrific abuse against children. Justin Welby was notified of allegations against Smythe as far back as 2013. But Smythe was allowed to move abroad with the knowledge of church officials, where he continued to abuse children. Here's our religion editor, Ali McBourne.
I'm John Smythe.
He was arguably one of the most prolific abusers ever associated with the Church of England, with more than 120 victims until his death in 2018. Last week, a report said that by 2013, the Archbishop of Canterbury knew, but inadequate action meant the abuse continued. Justin Welby's apologised, but says he won't resign. But today, one senior member of the church broke ranks.
I think that it's very hard for the church, as the national, established church, to continue to have a moral voice in any way, shape or form in our nation when we cannot get our own house in order with regard to something as critically important, something that would be asked of any institution, let alone the church.
And given that, what do you think about the position of the Archbishop of Canterbury?
I think, sadly, his position's untenable, so I think he should resign.
But the Archbishop of Canterbury stepping down is not going to solve the problems, is it?
It's not going to solve the problem, but I think it would be a very clear indication that a line has been drawn.
Who will believe a 16-year-old lad against a bishop and a vicar?
Matthew Einarson is a survivor of church abuse, here testifying at an inquiry. He wasn't a victim of John Smythe, but says the events of the past week have been re-traumatising for all victims. It's clear where he stands on Justin Welby.
I think he should definitely resign, and he should take with him all those who have failed in safeguarding. If he doesn't, the church is showing itself again. It doesn't understand what it's like to be a victim. It doesn't understand what safeguarding is. For years it's been saying it will do its own safeguarding, it knows what it's doing. It doesn't.
Supporters of Justin Welby say he's brought about a lot of improvements in the way abuse is handled by the church, but with not just the institution, but the man who leads it now so plainly to have been shown to be culpable, the pressure continues to mount.
So, Ali, another allegation of a child abuser connected to the church in some way. This time it's threatening the position of the most senior cleric in the land. Yeah, our viewers will feel like they've heard abuse stories in the church many times before. What is different is this is not just about Justin Welby leading a failing institution. It's about personal culpability. What is said in this report is that Justin Welby knew in 2013. He did tell the police, the church did tell the police, but he didn't pursue it enough such that this abuser, who was in South Africa by this time, continued to abuse until his death in 2018. There's also suggestions that if Justin Welby had done more at that stage, then existing survivors in this country would be allowed to move on. We know that at least one of those tried to take his life during that time. But also, Justin Welby has not been honest in the past about how much he knew and when. It was only once a documentary came out in 2017
bringing the abuse of John Smythe to light, that he acknowledged it had taken place, but he said that that was the first he knew the extent of it. We now know that is wrong, and that is why there is this clamour that he personally faces up to that.
OK, Aline, thank you. Well, if you've been affected by sexual abuse or violence, details of help and support are available at bbc.co.uk/actionline, or you can call for free at any time to hear recorded information on 0800 077 077. Commemorations have been held across the UK and Europe with a 2-minute silence to mark Armistice Day. Here, Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, led the ceremony at the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire, as a 2-minute silence was held at 11 o'clock on the 11th of November to mark the time and date when the World War I armistice came into effect. Sarah Campbell reports.
The National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire, engraved with the names of 16,000 service personnel. They and the millions who've died in the wars since 1914 were remembered today.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn.
The 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, the moment the First World War came to an end in 1918.
When you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow, we gave our today.
The Duchess of Edinburgh laid a wreath on the central plinth of the Armed Forces Memorial. Adding colour to every ceremony, poppies, the flower which grew in abundance on the battlefields when the fighting stopped.
We have to remember those that didn't come home, because those that didn't come home give us the chance to have a day and to have our lives.
I hide a lot of my emotions, and this weekend they all come out.
The generations, side by side, to honour those who gave so much for our freedom. Sarah Campbell, BBC News.
Events also took place across Europe. Sir Keir Starmer attended an armistice ceremony in Paris alongside the French President Emmanuel Macron, the first British Prime Minister since Sir Winston Churchill to travel to do so. Caroline Hawley reports.
Beneath the iconic Arc de Triomphe in Paris, two men sending a powerful message of solidarity. President Macron personally invited Sir Keir to attend France's national commemorations. Not since the end of World War II has a British Prime Minister done this. Grainy images show the French wartime leader Charles de Gaulle standing beside Winston Churchill, who you can just see here tipping his hat. Together today they laid wreaths of remembrance, but pressing modern-day problems also preoccupy these men, which they discussed away from the cameras, including the crisis in the Middle East and the war in Ukraine. European leaders are unnerved by the implications of Donald Trump's incoming presidency. Kyiv wants more help from its Western allies to push Russian forces back. Donald Trump said on the campaign trail he could end the war within a day, though no one knows quite what that means. Today, two allies stood side by side, remembering the past and rekindling their country's relationship after Brexit. A French choir even singing the British national anthem. a sign of togetherness in facing new, uncertain times. Caroline Hawley, BBC News.
While in Paris, the Prime Minister and the French President reaffirmed their commitment to support Ukraine for as long as necessary. It follows the election of Donald Trump in the United States, who said he would end the war in one day. Well, let's go to our North America editor, Sarah Smith, who's in Washington for us. And Sarah, there have been conflicting reports about whether Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin have spoken on the phone or not about Ukraine. What can you tell us?
Yeah, it was reported first in the Washington Post here that there had been a phone call between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin last week, and that in that call, Donald Trump had warned the Russian president not to escalate the military action in Ukraine and reminded him of just how large a US military presence there is in Europe. But since then, today, the Kremlin has said that this is absolutely false information, completely untrue, and that no conversation took place. So we reached out to the Trump team to ask, and they said they can't comment on calls with foreign leaders. So if the call did happen, it would appear that Vladimir Putin was either extremely unhappy with what was said on the call or with how it's being reported, and that's why it's being denied that it ever took place at all. Because we do know that Donald Trump has spoken to dozens of world leaders since the election last week, and as well as doing that, he has got on with appointing his new administration. We've got some new appointments today, principally at Stephen Miller, who is an immigration hawk and hardliner, and he's been appointed Deputy Chief of Staff in charge of policy. He was in the last Trump administration. He was one of the architects, if you remember, the child separation policy, where over 5,000 kids of immigrants were taken away from their parents at the US-Mexico border. So it's somebody who was in charge of that before, back in the administration, probably in charge of immigration policy. And he's created the post of border czar as well, Donald Trump has, and that's going to be somebody who will be tasked with getting on from the beginning with his promise to deport millions of illegal immigrants who are living here in America. So we're getting a taste of the direction of the Trump administration. It seems they really do want to concentrate on the pledges he made about illegal immigration and cracking down on it.
Sarah in Washington, thank you. The time is 12 minutes past 6, our top story this evening. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, is coming under increasing pressure to quit over accusations of a cover-up involving a prolific child abuser associated with the church. And the climate conference COP29 kicks off in Azerbaijan today amidst warnings this year is on track to be the hottest on record.
At 6:30, the Tower of London remembers lives lost with a special tribute on Armistice Day. And we're at New Covent Garden Market as it celebrates 50 years of trading in South London.
Do you have a smart energy meter? They were rolled out 12 years ago to help us reduce our bills and take advantage of cheaper tariffs. But BBC Panorama has found evidence that some people could be missing out on cheaper bills depending where in the country they live. About 36 million smart meters are now being used across the country. Back in 2011, the government said they wanted one installed in every household by 2019. But technical problems mean around 3.5 million of those are not working as they should. Zoe Conway has this report.
Hi Hartesh,
Hi.
I'm Zoe. Hartesh Batu lives in Glasgow.
So this is my smart meter in here in this cupboard.
He got a smart meter hoping it could help lower his energy bills. But he says it never worked.
In fact, that's actually my 6th smart meter because I've had them replaced that many times.
A smart meter is meant to send data to your energy supplier. But if the signal isn't strong enough to reach your house, it won't work. When I caught up with Hartesh a few weeks later, he said that's the problem his energy supplier diagnosed.
Basically, they said that because I'm so far north, that there will be a problem with the signals or something, some kind of signalling issue. You know, I just thought that was bonkers.
In the north of England and Scotland, long-range radio signals are used for your smart meter to send data to your energy company. In the Midlands, Wales and south of England, the mobile phone or cellular network is used. Energy UK has confirmed for the first time to Panorama that there is a regional divide.
There are issues in the north, we do know that. So there are sometimes issues with the network signal in terms of how it transmits and how it kind of pings information back and forth, and they just aren't strong enough in certain areas.
It was the coalition government's decision to split the communications network for smart meters 12 years ago. At the time, it was decided radio signals work best in northern England and Scotland. Hartesh's supplier Octopus Energy says it's now fixed his meter by taking the unusual step of connecting it to the mobile phone network instead. It said it was frustrated by government regulations that dictate it must use radio waves technology in Scotland and northern England. Capita, which runs the communications network, says it provides 99.3% coverage across Britain and that it's currently exploring alternative technology solutions. Most experts agree smart meters can help to deliver lower bills and lower carbon emissions. But if the tech problems continue, that could undermine the government's goal of getting them into every home. Zoe Conway, BBC News.
A Premier League referee has been suspended after a video was circulated on social media allegedly showing him making extremely derogatory comments about Liverpool and the club's former manager Jurgen Klopp. The body in charge of refereeing English professional games says David Coote's suspension comes into force with immediate effect and is pending a full investigation. The video, widely shared on social media, has not been verified by the BBC. It's unclear when it was filmed or its authenticity. Our sports editor, Dan Rowan, is at Anfield. So, look, Dan, we can't repeat some of the words on this video because of the time of day, but what are you able to tell us?
Well, the PGMOL, the referee's body, Fiona, they acted quickly today after this video emerged on social media, suspending David Coote, as you say, with immediate effect, pending a full investigation. They made no further comment. Liverpool, meanwhile, have had nothing officially to say. They are aware of this video. Coote was actually refereeing their 2-0 victory against Aston Villa here at Anfield on Saturday evening. But this video refers, it appears, to a match that was staged in July 2020 between Liverpool and Burnley. It ended 1-1. Coote has been refereeing in the top flight since 2018. He's now one of the most experienced and senior match officials. But on that occasion, he was criticised by Liverpool's their manager, Jurgen Klopp. The coach said that Coote and his colleagues had failed to call fouls that Klopp said had been made against his players. He was critical afterwards, and in fact in the immediate aftermath of that game he was seen arguing with Coote and his officials. It's not known, as you say, whether this video is authentic and when in fact it was filmed yet, but if it is authentic, it does turn out that it could have grave consequences for Coote, and given how much scrutiny the referee's body is constantly under, its judgment and its decision making, if it does turn out that it is authentic, then it could be a damaging episode for the PGMOL as well.
Dan, thank you. A former British Army soldier, Daniel Khalifa, who was at the centre of a manhunt last year, has pleaded guilty to escaping from Wandsworth Prison. He had originally pleaded not guilty to the charge. He's currently on trial for 3 other charges, including communicating information useful to an enemy, namely Iran. Daniel Sanford has the details.
Early in the morning of the 6th of September last year, Daniel Khalifa was in custody in Wandsworth Prison, working in the kitchen. But he rode out of the prison, clinging on under this food delivery truck at 7:30 in the morning. By the afternoon, he was 6 miles away in Richmond, stealing a cap from Mountain Warehouse. After 3 days on the run, he was recaptured, but then pleaded not guilty to escaping from lawful custody. Today, in the middle of giving evidence at his trial, he changed his plea, telling the jury, "I'm guilty." During his evidence, Daniel Khalifa had said that he escaped from Wandsworth Prison because he was being held on the vulnerable prisoners units, which he didn't like because there were sex offenders there, and that he'd been warned if he was moved onto one of the main wings, he might be attacked by terrorists, as he put it. He said that he'd hoped that when he was recaptured, he'd be moved into the high security unit at Belmarsh Prison. He told the jury he'd made the sling which he used to hang to the bottom of the lorry out of kitchen trousers, and that he'd been hidden from view by the tail lift. He said that before the lorry drove out of the prison, officers did their normal check using torches, and he heard one of the governors asking, "Have you searched the vehicle?" Daniel Khalifa joined the army at 16 and is accused of being in contact with Iranian intelligence by the age of 17. Seen here on a trip to Istanbul, he denies collecting information for an enemy, collating the names of special forces soldiers useful for terrorism, and perpetrating a bomb hoax by leaving these cylinders on his desk at his barracks. His trial continues. Daniel Sanford, BBC News at Woolwich Crown Court.
Global leaders are in Azerbaijan for the start of COP29 to try to agree on measures to reduce the use of fossil fuels. Top of the agenda for the poorer countries there is their call for money to help them cope with the effects of climate change. And overshadowing the whole meeting is the spectre of the United States withdrawing from global efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by pulling out of the Paris Climate Agreement, something Donald Trump did once before and may do again. Our climate editor, Justin Rolat, reports from Baku.
In the last few days, wildfires have been burning on both coasts of the United States. There was even a bushfire in a New York City park. Meanwhile, the Philippines is enduring its fourth cyclone in 3 weeks. This reminder of the weather extremes climate change is likely to bring comes as the latest round of UN climate talks opened. The head of the talks warned of those risks.
Colleagues, we are on the road to ruin. Climate change is already here.
Like in Somalia, where it's driving even hotter, drier weather, which in turn is deepening conflict. The cause? The emissions made by developed countries as they got rich. Yet poorer countries like Somalia feel the impacts hardest.
We're not talking about something that is nice to have. We're talking about a threat to humanity here. So we really, really need to look at it like that and take it very, very seriously because it affects everybody on the planet.
The answer, say poorer countries, is, yep, money.
Developing countries want to see the flow of cash from rich to poor increase from $100 billion a year to $1 trillion a year. It is a huge sum, and perhaps not surprisingly, the list of world leaders who've decided not to come here is increasing. The US, China, the European Union, Brazil, Germany, France and Canada are all countries whose leaders have decided not to attend.
There are some newcomers. The Taliban spotted a photo op. Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer has arrived. Tomorrow he will be announcing the UK's target for cutting emissions over the next decade. The hope is it will encourage others to bold action as these tricky talks begin. Justin Rolat, BBC News, Baku.
The head of NHS England says the current backlog of care wouldn't be as bad if the last government hadn't blocked a request for an additional 10,000 beds during the COVID pandemic. Amanda Pritchard has told the COVID inquiry the beds would have been used for planned operations and to build resilience as the country approached a second winter of the pandemic. Well, our health editor Hugh Pym is here. These are pretty strong words, aren't they, from Amanda Pritchard?
Yes, Fiona. Amanda Pritchard was number 2 to Sir Simon Stevens at NHS England back in July 2020, and she has told the inquiry that the request for 10,000 more hospital beds being rejected was very disappointing. The inquiry was told that the government had said instead the Nightingale hospitals should be used. They were created in the early stages of the pandemic but were barely used at all. Amanda Pritchard's view was that they were only there, as she said, military field hospitals in effect, only if no other alternatives were possible. She said instead what was required were hospital beds with specialist treatment for planned operations and non-urgent procedures, and that if they'd been available then, 10,000 hospital beds, a lot more operations would have been carried out since, and the NHS wouldn't be in the position that it is now. Now, a Treasury spokesman has said that evidence has been submitted to the inquiry and it wouldn't be appropriate to comment further at this stage.
Hugh, thanks very much. The European boss of Fujitsu was asked at the Post Office inquiry today why the company still hasn't offered any compensation to victims 10 months after he said it had a moral obligation to contribute. Fujitsu was responsible for Horizon's faulty software, which made it look like money was missing from sub-postmasters' branches. Many innocent people were imprisoned and thousands are still waiting for compensation. Our business correspondent Emma Simpson reports.
3 children of former sub-postmasters. Their parents' lives were ruined by the post office and they've been left traumatised too.
We are here to see Fujitsu. They offered us support and we have not received that yet.
Angry?
Very angry, very disappointed.
They're on their way to the inquiry. The last time they saw the boss of Fujitsu was August. Their group has 180 members now, and they were hopeful of the company's support.
We shared the most personal things that you could go into.
Some for the first time.
Some for the first time. It's difficult to share that with each other, let alone a stranger. And it feels now, it was almost like a tick box exercise.
We were all innocent children when it happened, and we've lost so much and we just want some of that back. We're not asking, nothing will ever amount to what we've lost. We're just asking for that little bit of help to get us back on that right path.
They later had a front row seat when Paul Patterson was pressed on what his next steps would be.
We do want to engage in that way. I'm still unclear about what things we can do other than sums of money. The list of, I think the education topic that we talked about, the mental health topic that we talked about, how we can as a company help. So we still want to do that. Frankly, we've struggled though to figure out how.
And most importantly, when.
Appreciate him answering the questions, but we do still feel a little bit disappointed that nothing has yet been done. So we're still waiting.
And so is the government on when and how Fujitsu plans to cough up for its share of compensation. Emma Simpson, BBC News at the Post Office inquiry.
New research shows that the planet Uranus and its 5 biggest moons, the outer reaches of our solar system, may not be the dead, sterile worlds that scientists once thought. New analysis of data gathered by NASA's Voyager 2 spacecraft almost 40 years ago suggests the possibility of one of the elements key to sustaining life, an ocean. Here's our science correspondent, Palab Ghosh.
Uranus is an icy world in the outer reaches of our solar system. It's among the coldest of all the planets.
Scientists are studying the first pictures of the planet Uranus.
The public got its first close-up look in 1986, when NASA's Voyager 2 spacecraft flew by and sent back these sensational pictures of the planet and its 5 major moons. The data it sent back suggested that the planets and its moons were inactive, and it also found that Uranus's protective magnetic field was strangely distorted. But a new analysis shows that Voyager 2 flew past on a bad day. This is a position of the magnetic field of Uranus when Voyager 2 flew past. The field should act like a bottle, capturing the gases that the worlds give off. Voyager 2 found none, indicating that they were all dead, sterile worlds. It turns out that the readings were taken during a powerful solar storm, which might have blown the gases away. The storm also distorted the magnetic field, which should really look like this. All of which means that Uranus and all 5 of its moons might be active and have oceans.
So these results mean that the Uranian system could be much more exciting than we previously thought. There could be moons there that have the conditions necessary for life. They might have oceans below the surface, which could be, I don't know, teeming with fish.
One of the scientists working on the 1986 Voyager flyby was delighted to hear about the new results, which have been published in the journal Nature Astronomy.
I find the new results very fascinating, and I'm really excited to see that there is potential for life in the Uranian system, and that so much is being done with the Voyager data. That is really amazing that scientists are going back and looking at this data collected in 1986 and finding new results and new discoveries.
It's been nearly 40 years since Voyager 2 flew past the icy world and its moons. NASA plans to launch a new mission due to arrive in 2045. Scientists hope to find out then whether the moons might have the possibility of being home to life. Palab Ghosh, BBC News.
Let's take a look at the weather a little bit closer to home. Louise Lear is here. Hi, Louise.
Hi there, Fiona. Simple pleasures for me. I'm really excited about the idea of getting sunshine.
This is a familiar story, isn't it? This has been November so far. Last week, as you can see, Loughborough in Leicestershire, but it was a different story today. Not a cloud in the sky. Finally, we've still got high pressure with us, but it is producing some beautiful spells of sunshine for most of us today. And the high is going to stay with us, actually, now through the night tonight with light winds and clear skies. That's going to allow a touch of frost and some fog, and some of it dense in places. Favoured spots for that closest to the centre of the low, so Northern Ireland, northwest Scotland, northwest England perhaps. Bit more of a breeze running down and off the North Sea. That's brought a few isolated showers, but that'll prevent temperatures from falling too far. But further west, it is going to be a chilly start to tomorrow morning. Bit of a shock to the system, and yes, quite a murky one as well. Some of this fog under very light winds will be slow to clear away, slowly lifting away. Again, that breeze will continue to drive in some showers across East Anglia, South East England, and perhaps down across the Channel Isles. But let's not forget the sunshine for most of us. A lovely day with sunny spells coming through. A little bit cooler, but hopefully the sunshine will compensate. 8 to 13 Celsius. Now, the high pressure is going to stay with us. It will allow this very weak weather front in on Wednesday, and that'll produce some showery outbreaks of rain, slowly sinking its way south out of Scotland, down into the borders and Northern Ireland. But certainly a little bit more cloud around perhaps on Wednesday. Best of the breaks further south and east, and again highs of 11 to 12 degrees. Now, high pressure is going to stay with us until the weekend, and then there is a chance potentially of a little bit more in the way of significant rain as weather fronts start to push in from the far north and west. So we finish our working week on a relatively dry note. Some rain around though for next weekend. Fiona.
Louise, thanks very much. That is the BBC News at 6. You can keep up with all the latest developments, as always, on the BBC website. Now it's time to join our colleagues for the news where you are. Bye-bye.